The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Earlier this week, International Anti-Corruption Day was marked the world over. Now, in Sri Lanka, the present government was overwhelmingly elected into office on an anti-corruption mandate. At present, Sri Lanka is also in an IMF-supported program, following which a host of anti-corruption legislation was put in place. In this current backdrop, what does the future of the anti-corruption framework look like? Let's find out. My guests tonight are Dr. Herath Gunatilake, Executive Director, Center for Poverty Analysis. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
Also joining me tonight is Nicole Elias, Program Manager, Private Sector, TISL. Good evening, Nicole.
Thanks,
Dr. Gunatilake, when we speak of corruption, we need to talk about the massive social and economic costs that it incurs on the citizenry. If you could help us put this into perspective.
As we all know that there's a new government in power, there's a huge expectation from the side of the people that there will be some difference in corruption levels, and in that light I think understanding the economic and social cost of corruption is very, very important. Thank you for the question. Now let me also start my response highlighting the current economic situation in the country, that especially focusing on poverty. Before the economic crisis, our poverty level, our headcount ratio was down to about 4%. During the crisis, our measurements in 2023 showed that it has increased up to 30% of the population. And more recent findings, which are not confirmed yet, shows that the poverty levels even have gone up to some more than 50% of the population. So we call this crisis-driven poverty, and the crisis-driven poverty reduction actually require quick economic growth. Now, if you look at our growth patterns in the recent past, we were in negative growth in 2022 and 3. Now we have come back to positive growth, but growth rates are very small yet. Now, one of the fundamental requirements to take people out of poverty is to have a higher rate of economic growth. Now, because of that, I will first highlight how corruption would affect economic growth in a country. Now, there are various channels through which corruption affects the economic growth and prosperity. One is, as very well known, the ill-gain money generally exit the country. Sometimes even they don't even come to the country because the deals are cut and the money is deposited in overseas accounts. Especially if it is a bigger project, if a commission is coming from a contractor, it even doesn't come to the country. That leakage from the society reduce the investable amount of resources for the country. For any country to grow, there should be investment. When you invest $1 or rupee in the economy, there is a multiply effect. Economic output will grow more than $1, 1 rupee. So investment is so critical that we reduce the capacity to invest by taking this money outside the country. That is number one. The second important thing about corruption is that, again linked to the growth. For economic growth, sometimes domestic resources are not sufficient. Most of the countries in the recent past, if you look at Southeast Asian countries, all over Asian experience, the foreign direct investment played a huge role in supporting the growth in many countries. Now, Sri Lanka was not able to attract sufficient amount of foreign direct investment, partly because of the corruption. We have given very attractive package for foreign investors through the Board of Investment. But then when the investors come, there are various stories about that our political leaders or bureaucrats asking huge sums of money as a commission. There were instances where the requested amount of money from fish canning project is like 75% of the project cost. Project was like 150 million, the requested commission was 100 million rupees. And there was another instance where we had this solid waste dump somewhere in Meetotomulla. After that, there was some interest to develop some electricity generation using solid waste. Again, some Japanese companies came with 2-3 projects, and the requested bribes were so high they left the company. So that discouraged foreign direct investment. Then very quickly these words spread among the investors. Today's information era that these stories are known, and also every year we publish corruption indices by World Bank and others. It's not a secret. So that discouraging foreign direct investment is the second effect. The third impact is that when a country is going through corruption, the investment also motivation behind selecting projects also linked to corruption. Normally, when we select a project, we select a project that gives the highest return, to social benefit to the society. But in a corrupt society, the political leaders and bureaucrats select the projects which give higher opportunities for corruption. So that we are investing even borrowed money on wrong projects. I will call them slow returns or no return projects. There can be long list of them. And then there are long lists like that, but also corruption has gone to the level that corruption has even threatened the lives of the public. Especially if you look at the recent corruption scandals in the health sector, that there were well-known cases where we have imported low quality drugs, or sometimes we pretended certain materials as drugs. In the case of immunoglobulin, I think it was not immunoglobulin to my understanding, and then that we have actually endangered the very lives of the public. So I will stop here. As we go, we can dig more into these impacts.
Thank you, Dr. Gunatilake, for setting the stage. Nicole Elias, I'd like to come to you with the next question. Pursuant to the IMF supported program that Sri Lanka is currently in, Sri Lanka undertook to enact certain legislation such as the Anti-Corruption Act, and we have a campaign finance law as well. How successful do you think they will be in terms of implementation? Since they were just enacted, we can't really say if they have been successful. We'll have to wait and see. But in terms of implementation, I'd like you to also bring in the Bribery Commission and other agencies, implementation agencies, and speak to us as to whether this could prove to be useful in Sri Lanka's anti-corruption framework, pragmatically.
Okay. Thank you, Sonali, for the question, and thank you for having me as well. So in terms of the laws that have been brought in, with this IMF agreement, we're seeing not only these two laws, but several laws that are being brought in. So there's also the upcoming Proceeds of Crime Act that has not come in yet, procurement law, which has been missing from this country for several years. What's interesting is these laws, so if we're talking about the Anti-Corruption Act, it actually came in more than a year ago at this point. So it was enacted, if I remember correctly, in August last year.
But the operationalization?
Exactly, that's the interesting part. And the campaign finance, it has a long name, I'm just going to call it campaign finance just for ease, was enacted in January last year. We see a trend of these laws being introduced kind of simply to maybe even tick the box of the IMF rules. We're not seeing if the laws are done, if they are drafted correctly, if they've engaged civil society or public consultations, because the importance of these laws, it affects everyone in the country. If you take the Anti-Corruption Act, it's not something exactly new. We had anti-corruption legislation in the past. We had the Bribery Act number 11 of 1954. we had the Seabok Act, which is basically the Bribery Commission Act, and even the Asset Declaration Law. So those three laws were amalgamated into what is now known as the Anti-Corruption Act, sections of those three laws. And also this act has included several interesting new areas, such as looking at private sector bribery for the first time, sports-related corruption, identifying sexual bribery as an offense under the law, which all wasn't there previously. So these are good changes. And from what the anti-corruption legislation was, this is quite a good law. And it was quite a consultative process as well. TISL itself was very involved with the drafting as well. There was a lot of public consultation behind this particular legislation. And the interesting thing, like you mentioned, seeing how it's going to be implemented, how effective, how strong the law is. Because when you often talk to people and ask, you know, do you think Sri Lanka has good laws? They say no, but that's actually not the truth. We have good laws. It's the implementation that is weak. So in terms of the anti-corruption law being brought in, even though, for example, private sector bribery is introduced for the first time and hasn't been really looked at before, we only see one case so far that has been brought forward by the Bribery Commission, which was in, I believe, January early this year. And that was on a case of sexual bribery, but in a private company, in a small company. So whether it's being implemented by the commission needs to be looked at more strongly. And you always have this understanding that the people always say, oh, you're after the big fish, what about the small, sorry, you're after the small fry, what about the big fish? And we always see it's a policeman that's got arrested, or a school principal, or a teacher. What about the higher level? What about the higher up persons, right? So we are not seeing big implementation of this law at the moment. It's since it's still new, it's still in the early stages, we'll have to, I would say, wait and see. In terms of the campaign finance law, what I can say is that now we just recently had 2 elections, the presidential and straight after the general elections, and so the campaign finance law also has certain limitations on who can actually fund politicians or fund these campaigns, what kind of persons cannot. There's quite a straightforward list, but again, are those being looked at properly, or is it more focused on election violence? Those are the kind of problems we need to look at. So in terms of implementation, it's kind of a waiting game at the moment. We'll have to wait and see how it goes.
Dr. Gunatilake, earlier in your introductory statement, you said that to reduce crisis-driven poverty, what is required is quick economic growth. Since you're also a professor of agricultural economics at the University of Peradeniya, I'd like to very quickly ask you, don't you believe that the agricultural sector in Sri Lanka needs a complete overhaul instead of random tokenistic measures that are brought in by successive government, where structural issues are not being addressed? How do you view this?
Actually, you are very correct pointing out that the structural issues of the agriculture. Now, we are right now a little bit below, but we used to be 4,000 per capita income nation. If you translate, at least, you know, that 50% of that for a farm family, they should be earning something like 250,000 per month. With the current structure of farming, with 1 acre, 2 acre, half an acre, farmers do not get enough income. In fact, the young generation is not interested in farming. We need to transforming our farming to a medium scale, commercially driven farming sector. That is the way to salvage the sector. That we cannot do by, you know, maintaining this poor set of farmers by giving them subsidies and some handouts here and there. That's not the right policy. We need to really, you know, first thing, we have to provide the land titles for all the farmers. Yeah. We should allow land exchange among the farmers, and then supplementary policies to ensure some sort of land consolidation happens in the country. And then also the agriculture sector should be viewed as part of the overall economy. Now, for Sri Lanka, our part of our economic crisis is actually our inability to earn enough dollars, because we import more, export less. There are some other sources of dollars, but we definitely need to industrialize our country. Export-oriented industrialization has to happen in the country. For that process, agriculture should supply the excess labor. Right now, about 30% of the labor force is in agriculture, but our contribution to GDP is agriculture is about 7%. So that surplus has to be, surplus labor should be, put into other sectors, and then farm size should increase. That will allow commercial farming. Entrepreneurs are the ones who should be doing the farming, not that old, image of a very, old-looking guy with, mammoth carrying and all that. That farmer image should be changed to somebody who is driving a pickup to his field and, using drone and various other high-tech equipment, who has the bargaining power to decide the price and store his product whenever price is not good enough. So that kind of resourceful entrepreneurial farmers are the ones we need.
Right now, farmers are very much disempowered, aren't they?
Yes, because of that vision actually, that transformation needed in agriculture has not been fully discussed in this country. When today I gave a keynote speech in the Agricultural Economic Association in the morning in Peradeniya. This topic was, the topic that I presented, and I requested all the researchers to do relevant research for the land consolidation, so that we can have our own model. Now, Norway has done it, China is doing it, India might go into that very soon, but we need to have our own model of land consolidation. So that, I think, pretty much is the need of the day.
Dr. Herath, I'd also like to speak to you, getting back to the topic of anti-corruption, of how investors are afraid to come into Sri Lanka because of this culture of bribery and corruption, which is also reflected in all these indices. I'd like to draw your attention to this point about overregulation.
Yes.
How does that hamper Sri Lanka being an attractive, competitive economy?
Yes. Usually the overregulation, the government, the public sector workers love regulations, because the overregulation gives them power. So using that power, they can get bribes and commissions and things. So that's the usual practice.
So, for example, you're talking about getting a permit.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you can also take an example and take us through what is wrong with the example.
I'll take since we talk about agriculture, let us take agricultural imports. Now, we have kept the practice of issuing import license to a couple of traders.
Okay.
The minister has the power to issue I don't know whether minister or secretary in the ministry, the government has to issue that particular license to import. Then what happens is that, that regulation prevent competition. Now, whenever there is a shortage of onion, if onion is allowed to be imported by one or two traders, there's a monopoly.
Yeah.
That is what in economics, the whole effort should be to prevent monopolies.
Yeah.
So they import onion and then they sell it at, there was one time it was 1,000 rupees a kilo. So that is one example where regulation, help corruption. But there are two types of corruption. Basically, one corruption is called grand corruption. That is where the elite group in the society, the political leaders, top bureaucrats, the top even private sector leaders are involved in this grand corruption, like central bank bond scam, this Adani wind power deal, and various other deals regarding the road construction. These are grand corruption. There are some petty corruption, but when you look at the petty corruption also, when you aggregate all the petty corruption, that created the heavy bureaucratic system that discourage investment, domestic for in both. Now, for example, I can give you a good example of this overregulation taking the forestry sector.
Okay.
Now, in Sri Lanka, the timber prices, I don't know whether you all are building houses, timber prices are really high among the cost items. Now, in fact, after our rupee devalue, cement and other item also went up, but timber has been an expensive item. Now, why timber is so expensive is partly because of this overregulation. Now, if you have any tree you cultivated in your home garden, jack or mahogany or teak, you cannot cut and transport it. You need a permit. The reason given by the government authority is that to protect the natural forest. But the natural forest, you don't have mahogany, teak, jack naturally grown. There are natural timber species like satin and horror and ebony and so on, that these are not the species. Now, even for those other species that are grown in the home gardens, you need this timber permit. Getting a timber permit is a tedious thing. I once got 2 timber permits in my life to build my own house. I know how tedious it is. So that, you have to go and fill so many forms and so on. So basically, you, especially given that many of the lands don't have titles, you simply cannot take the permit. Now, what happened is there are a set of timber traders. They form a coalition with the Divisional Secretariat Office, Grama Niladhari and Forest Department, RFO, DFO. So they are in a collusion with this thing, and then the timber traders can easily get the permit. How they get the permit is, when I took my timber permit in 2001, every truckload of timber coming out of Monaragala district, the total bribe amount is like 20,000 rupees. That time my salary was like 8,000 rupees in the university. You can gauge, you can wait. So that 20,000 rupees is distributed among Grama Niladhari, RFO, DFO, Divisional Secretariat, and the clerk in the Divisional Secretariat who handle the subject. So it is a very well organized system. Nobody can break it. Luckily, I had some friends in the AG office through which I was able to I did a research. Now, what happens is that, with that system, even people cut the trees in the reserves and sell it in the market. I put one undergraduate student to study this. He, in one of his case studies in his undergraduate report, there was one satin tree trunk in a village called Kotabo in Monragala district. For that tree in his land, there were 17 permits issued. Because when you issue a timber permit, there should be a tree trunk.
Right.
And then you even measure the girth of that tree trunk and the logs and all that. And with the day that you transport timber, Grama Niladhari and RFO should come and seal every log. You are only given 24 hours. But all these very restrictive regulation doesn't work for timber traders. Because they pay off all these people and all these seals and everything is given, the permit is given. So if I am a timber trader, I can cut a tree from the reserve and then take a permit, because those who are signing, all the officials, Grama Niladhari up to Divisional Secretariat, are paid for. So that then the net outcome of this corruption is that this is detrimental for the timber cultivation in the country, because traders are paying this money, they have a very high bargaining power. They suppress the farm gate price of timber, and then they pay these officials, and then when timber comes to Colombo and other places, the consumers pay excessive price. So that suppressed price at the farm gate level discourage people growing trees. Those days when we were kids, our parents, when there's a jack tree or some timber tree in our home garden, father always tell that don't do anything, don't cut or anything to this tree, because they value this tree. But today it is different. When they have a tree, they just immediately cut it, because no point of keeping the tree, because they know that it is very difficult for them to sell. Otherwise, actually in this country we have a lot of
people don't really pay too much attention, or they don't think it's corruption. They think it's happening just within the sector. It doesn't really affect them in any way. But like Dr. Herath also mentioned, there is always a cost of corruption. We might not see it so easily, but there is always a cost. So if we're looking at private sector corruption, it can take several forms, and like you mentioned, grand and petty corruption. When you go a little deeper into it and look at corruption, it can be both coercive and collusive in nature. So if we're taking the coercive nature of corruption, is what you'd often find people talking about. They'll say, oh, I had no choice. Some government official threatened to shut down my business, so I had to bribe. Or I needed to get a permit, so I had to bribe. I had no option. They forced me. Or if it's as simple as, not going so far as the private sector, if you take just a general person, you drive along the road and you get stopped for a speeding ticket. Or I had no option. He was saying, give me a bribe and I'll let you go. So that the blame is usually that, oh, it's the government servants that are asking us to pay, so we pay. But we're also leaving out the collusive form of corruption, where the private sector knowingly engages in corruption, whether it's in a procurement process when the government calls for a tender. Are you getting together with 3 like-minded businesses and saying, you bid at this price, I'll bid at this price? Whoever gets it will subcontract to each other and take the profits for ourselves and divide the profits. Now that would be collusive in nature, and that's the kind of corruption that often gets missed out because they have no one to blame but themselves in that situation. And it's very easy even when we do trainings, often the response that comes is, yeah, but you don't understand, we have no choice. It's that kind of coercive nature. But are you proactively committing corruption by doing these kind of things? So whether it's procurement, whether it's any other kind of corruption, if your company doesn't have a strong anti-corruption policy, if there is no proper tone set at the top to abide by principles of anti-corruption, integrity, transparency in your company, you are unknowingly even perpetuating corruption throughout the company. Say if you take something as simple as a promotion, if you give 2 employees the option of, you have to bring in the most number of profit, the highest number of profit to the company within this particular time period, and use any means necessary, whoever wins will get the promotion. So if one person thinks, okay, you know what, I'm going to do it the right way, I'm not going to engage in bribery or corruption or anything, and gets the work done, and whereas the other person uses any means necessary, bribes their way through the entire process, and then does bring in the highest number of profits and gets promoted, you're already perpetuating that culture of corruption within your own company. And the person who lost out will automatically want to change themselves, thinking, oh, next time if I do this, I'll get the promotion. So you perpetuate that kind of corruption within your company. And corruption is, it's so interesting, right? It's such a bad thing, but it's so interesting because it can take on so many different forms. And in the private sector itself, I actually have a favorite form of corruption, which sounds ridiculous to say because I'm from an anti-corruption organization, but it's because it's so unique and different. Gift giving, gifts and hospitality. Sri Lanka is a country in which gift giving is so normalized. You don't even go to someone's house without taking, a cake or a packet of biscuits or something. You will get scolded by your parents if you do that. It's amazing how we found something so simple and thoughtful as just a gift to turn it into corruption, because you have people using sending a cake to the CEO, sending them on a business trip somewhere or a business trip, if I were to say so, which is actually disguised in a way that you have to give them something in the end, either get someone into the company to work for them or do some kind of paid back in some way, whether it's a job, whether it's anything, a contractor to become a supplier. So it's interesting that corruption takes on those kind of forms as well, but also we have sexual harassment, sexual bribery that can happen in a company, and various other forms. There's not even one exhaustive list. I think new forms get created all the time. Money laundering, if we take from a company, you can launder money, or even when you're talking about insider trading, right? If you're trading on the stock market with inside knowledge, that is also corruption. And I think the biggest issue is that a lot of people don't understand what corruption is. So they might also be engaging in it, not knowing that they're actually doing. They might think it's wrong, but they might not know it's corruption. So they think it's fine to go ahead. So this kind of lack of understanding, lack of awareness is where the private sector also needs to be taking that responsibility on and training their employees, taking it seriously, setting the tone from the top, training their boards, the management, all the stuff, right down to the new entrants, to people that have been with the company for several years that might be very comfortable with the processes and maybe no loopholes, whether you're making them go through trainings. There are some that are so strict, they'll have you do a training online every 6 or 3 months. If you fail, you have to sit through a classroom training. Are all companies following that? Not really. And also the law has not given them that the reason to do so, right? But now with the new law in place, we're seeing a trend of a lot more companies at least reaching out to TISL, asking us to do trainings, help them raise awareness in the companies, whether it's for the employees or for the suppliers. Yeah. So it's a bit of an interesting shift that it may be coming around with the new law, or it may be that, and also we also see that companies that have foreign subsidiaries, or sorry, it might even be a parent company that's foreign, that's from abroad, they might have stricter regulations. So then for that reason, they would be more compliant with the rules and regulations here. So that's how we're seeing corruption happen in the private sector, is what I would say.
Nicole, can I also add?
Yes.
You mentioned about the collusive corruption in the private sector, but that is also very big in the public sector. I can give you an example. Now in the central highway, there was a Galagedara Rambukkana segment that was actually bids went out 1.5 years ago. Finally, because of the crisis, project didn't happen. But this is a very interesting example. Now, there were 2 bids for this particular road segment. One was from a Chinese company. The bid amount was $1,050 million. Okay. And then there was another bid from a local consortium. That bid was 1,870. So that is the 2 bids. Interestingly, usually you should select a lower bid, but higher bid was selected. Because we have a loophole in the procurement law in the country. The cabinet can overrule procurement committee decisions. So then if you look at this is a 20-kilometer road segment. The accepted bid was 1,870 million. That means 1 kilometer would cost us $93.5 million. Now, I looked at publicly available information about 70 ADB projects. Average cost per kilometer was 1.6 million. In that sample, the highest per kilometer cost was one project from Sri Lanka, that is our Southern Highway, Southern Transport Development Project, that is 6.9 million. Now that project was implemented from 2005 to 2010 or something, now maybe 10 years later. Can this project in Rambukkana Galagedara cost us 93.5 million? There were a few tunnels in the project with there may be a little bit higher resettlement cost, maybe cost can be double to 15 million. Even I would accept 20 million. But the other 73 million I cannot understand. That is the corruption. That is where collusion happens. What they do is that when this bid goes out, then they negotiate with the contract. Okay, actual cost is 12 million. We are giving you 93 million. You take additional 3-4 million, give us the rest of the money. Deposit the money in a foreign account, we'll give you the contract. So that is how it is done. In fact, once one of our Director Generals responsible for South Asia projects asked from our Finance Secretary whether you are paving your roads with gold, looking at these costs. So this is a kind of a clear example how the collusion happened and the corruption, really increasing the cost of infrastructure. And then the end result is not only higher cost, but also we cannot repay the loans. Our debts became unsustainable because of these projects. Because that road will never generate returns to the, cover those kind of costs.
And just to add on to what you said, procurement is such a huge problem, right? Because we don't have a strong law. It's supposed to be coming out in January apparently, but we've been following the procurement guidelines since 2006. That's the 2006 guidelines that are currently in place. And we see a big trend of unsolicited proposals that come in. So you mentioned a few earlier as well, but that in itself, like you mentioned, the prices that are coming in, you see a huge discrepancy in if you open a bid and then actually get, because that's what usually happens, right? An unsolicited bid comes in, and then to kind of even the playing field a little bit, you put out a tender and ask everyone to bid, and then you can see that the costs are completely different from each other. But you might end up even going with the person who gave that unsolicited bid in the beginning, because that avenue is there, that opening is there for people to do this kind of bidding because it's not in the law. So that's...
We are in conversation with Dr. Herath Gunatilake and Nicole Elias. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform.
TV1. TV for life.
Once again, we are joining you from the newsroom of Newsfirst. So since the morning, we have been giving you updates about what's happening in Sri Lanka. So the President of Sri Lanka, Anurakumar Dissanayake, stated that the offenders will face serious consequences. And also, in the evening, Speaker Ashoka Rangwala resigned from his position as the Speaker of the Parliament. So with me right now is Mariam Gunamejaya. Mariam, so I believe there are a lot of updates that happened in the since the morning in Sri Lanka, right? And also in the world. So what are the updates?
Of course, Budin, it's quite a packed bulletin when it comes to political updates, especially since this morning, especially in Sri Lanka and across the world, like you said. So earlier this morning, President Anurakumar Dissanayake met with the media heads of the government, and he said that anyone who commits offences, they will face consequences regardless of their rank or status. And this evening, I think that's exactly what happened when Speaker Ashoka Rangwala was, he tendered his resignation and resigned from his position as Speaker. Well, what the Speaker said was that there were concerns over the past few days about several government officials over their titles and their academic, educational, professional qualifications, and someone who was facing a lot of scrutiny was the Speaker himself. So he issued a statement today, and he said that he will be tendering his resignation and he will resign as a Speaker. He said that he doesn't have the qualifications that are required to prove and verify what he needs to verify, and therefore to uphold the people's trust, to not inconvenience the government and to not inconvenience the people, he has tendered his resignation and will step back as a Speaker of Parliament. And at the same time, there were other developments when it comes to Minister of Justice Harshana Nanayakar, and of course the Deputy Speaker had posted on his Facebook social media platform and said that he has outlined all of his professional qualifications as well. And at the same time, Parliament issued a statement and said that Attorney Harshana Nanakara was given the title Doctor as an error that was performed by Parliament when including these details into the Parliament website, and he said, the official from Parliament said that there was a mistake made by the Parliament side and there was nothing wrong with what Minister of Justice, Attorney Harshana Nanakara, submitted to Parliament. So these are few of the local updates, Woodman. So these are the stories. Of course, to bring us a comprehensive report, to bring the viewers a comprehensive report, they will have to watch the news tonight.
Thank you, Mariam. I will be joining Tina as well for a small question. Tina, how's everything going?
Going good as always. And
Are you ready for
your next question? Yes, I am ready.
Okay. So tune in to our primetime news bulletin at 9 p.m.
TV1. TV for life.
Step away from the conventional art of storytelling. Get ready for the Newsfirst Breakfast Rundown with me, Zulfik Farzan.
The People's Platform.
We're talking about the costs of corruption for Sri Lanka. Dr. Herath Gunatilake, I'd like to speak to you about societal complicity in bribery and corruption. What role does societal complicity play? We too are guilty of encouraging this culture of bribery and corruption. We are also stakeholders. We are also complicit in this. So how can public awareness campaigns effectively shift these behaviors? How can the education landscape, age-appropriate education, also sort of help in creating this attitudinal shift that we are asking for?
Yeah. Actually, it's very, very important that to reduce corruption in a country is not an easy thing. It's so entrenched at every layer, from the top political leaders down to even the security guards who will take a bribe and allow you to go to hospital during the visiting hours or whatever. So, in a society that, we have to have corruption reduction measures. Some measures should be top down, like if the top leader of the country and the entire parliament in the country, if they are free of corruption, that gives some signals down. For example, this year there was a deadline for paying taxes, September 30th to October 30th. Accidentally, I was in the bank. And I was sitting with the bank manager and he said, "Sir, just wait, I have to talk to you, but I have some urgent business." Then after he finished that and he said that, "Sir, there's something totally different. A lot of people are now paying taxes. That has not happened in my life as a manager in ADB." So this perception that, there will be something seriously happening with corruption, people have changed a little bit. So that is top down, if the top change, it will infiltrate down. That's one. But that is not enough. As you very correctly said, we all are responsible for corruption because we are the ones who pay the bribes, especially on petty corruption. We are the one who pay to the principal to put my daughter or son to a popular school. We are the one who pay to this Pradesh Sabha official to get our building permit. We are the one who, pay bribes to, get my passport and whatever services that we need. So, unless we are against corruption, unless there is a demand from the grassroots level to reduce corruption, it will not happen. Now, in the society, they have a lot of, discussion about corruption. That discussion, I think, is limited to the educated middle class crowd in the country. Media covered that, so there's some, demand, but that is not enough. If you go to the grassroots level, now we are right now doing a survey to identify whether actually people are aware of corruption, whether people think that corruption is an important issue for their life. Some of the people, when you talk, generally when you talk to some of the farmers and general public, they say, oh, they may take some money, but that's okay. Like, that kind of attitude.
Normalization.
Normalization. It is a right of the political leaders to have a little bit more money from the system, like that. If we have that kind of attitude, I think we will never be able to minimize the corruption to the level. So, therefore, it's very, very important that we educate the public at the school level. Like, for example, now some of the more difficult problems like environmental management, dropping garbage here and there cannot be stopped unless we educate our children. From the grade 1, that value system should be embedded in their thinking. So then only, the society will change. I think the same importance should be given to corruption. That we should really educate our younger generation why corruption is not ethically, morally wrong, how corruption can undermine your development and keep you poor forever.
To your knowledge, Dr. Herath, is there such a program where there's a syllabus on anti-corruption for school students?
To my knowledge, there's nothing like that. Even at the university level, we don't have anything to discuss corruption this level.
I think from TISL, if you guys could maybe initiate a program like that along with other stakeholders, I think it could be a hit. I mean,
so
you can
just to add on to what Dr. Herath is saying, education is the most important thing in getting people to understand this, right? So something that we've done in the past is it's something very simple, an art competition. We've told kids, so we did this through our Mathura branch. From what I remember, it was our Mathura branch office. They did an art competition where they told the kids, I think they were all maybe under 10 years old, to draw what they understand as corruption. And they've done beautiful pictures, money changing hands, something kind of falling from, like money falling down from the sky and people picking it up. Very beautiful art had been done. And this idea of a corruption syllabus is something that we've been thinking about for a long time. And in fact, we did approach the Ministry of Education about this kind of thing. Can we include anti-corruption as, or like whether it's ethics, anti-corruption, even laws. People don't know the laws in the country, right? So introducing this into the syllabus, we were told that we'd have to wait for the next change of the syllabus. So from what I remember,
it could be a brochure, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be printed and sort of pasted into the books.
So something that we do is at the moment we work in 4 different sectors, so we can target as much stakeholders as possible. So one is the political sector, the public service sector, the private sector, and the community sector. So through our community sector team, we go all over the country. Sometimes we sit on the beach and just talk to people about corruption. We talk about the right to information, how they can use their right to information to actually gain access to the information they need to whatever is messing with their livelihood. They can get that information. So we've done this kind of awareness as much as possible throughout the country, whether it's right to information, anti-corruption. We also have what we call right to information hubs, several civil society organizations in each district. We have one in each district where they go and do programs and educational awareness for citizens in general to get this information out there. And what you often find is when talking to them, some are even illiterate persons. They can't even write their own signature if we give them something to sign. So, but when talking to them, you need to talk to them with their language, make them understand, okay, look, there is a cost to you, because like Dr. Herath said, no one sees that cost. So, okay, fine, I'm giving a bribe to put my child into school. It's not affecting anyone, it's not hurting anyone, but yes, it is. It's hurting someone else from getting that chance. When you bribe the police officer to get out of a speeding fine, you think, oh, it's fine, let him have some extra money. but then the next person who may have not done anything wrong, because sometimes you might get police officers trying to demand a bribe when you've actually not done something wrong. That person will be forced to pay a bribe, and just to get out of it, they'll end up paying a bribe.
So, Dr. Herath, now the kind of initiatives that Nicole spoke of, TISL has been doing some great work in the anti-corruption paradigm in Sri Lanka, but these are conversations at the periphery. You can't be talking to all 21 million people. So these initiatives need to be mainstreamed, and it needs the state to be a key stakeholder as well as other segments of society. How do we mainstream this anti-corruption discourse in a meaningful, coherent and sustainable manner?
Probably, I think this may be a golden opportunity now, given that the new government in the power, actually they promise a lot about corruption. And one of the reasons why we were not so successful in doing a lot of work on corruption, because the political leaders and the top bureaucrats were the beneficiaries of this corruption. So there's an incentive not to control corruption, because if the corruption is properly controlled, they should be in jail, or they will be curtailing their stream of income. But now I think at least we have a set of group of people in power who are not corrupt, at least in the history, but I don't know. I mean, unless we set the incentives right, power eventually can corrupt anybody. That is yet to see. But, if the government is genuinely interested on this, I think this is a golden opportunity for us to upscale these activities to national level. As you said, that we don't need the syllabus and we don't need exams and things, but we can have some extracurricular activities once or twice a year, extra day on corruption, something. We can go and deliver some lectures, show some films, or do some activities, and educate the children about the, what is corruption, what is the cost, how it will affect everybody in the society. So that I think is a good time for us to do something like that.
Nicole, speak to us about how technology can help in spreading this message.
There are good and bad sides to technology, as we've seen through, I don't know, robots taking over the world and things like that. But something simple, so if you go to a particular government office, if it's known to be engaging in corruption, and maybe you have a particular person that you get along well with, or that you can bribe to get your work done, when you keep going to that particular person at a particular counter, you know that you can always get your work done. If you introduce something as simple as a token system, you enter the building, you get a token, you get assigned to a random public official, and then you have that problem of, okay, can I get this person to do the same thing that I would the normal person that I go to or not? That kind of thing also reduces the option for corruption. But also if you're looking at something like the asset declarations that we have now included into the anti-corruption law, having that digitized online system to actually check, has someone actually declared their assets properly? Have they amassed wealth over a period of years after coming into public office? Is this something? So things like that can be used to technological advancements like that can be used to track corruption. Also, when people demanded for that system change, that just a few years ago, something that TISL worked on with a group of other civil society organizations was a governance diagnostic report, which was kind of similar to the one done by the IMF, where we've laid out several recommendations, 34 recommendations to bring about the system change. So another aspect to look at is even things like a beneficial ownership register. Who are the real owners behind the companies? If you're bidding for a contract, have you disclosed who your beneficial owner is? Is it maybe a minister, or is it someone who's related to a minister, might be in the same ministry itself? A conflict of interest register, are you actually disclosing your conflicts? Having those systems online, having these kind of transparency platforms through digitalization and technology would really help curtail corruption to a large extent, because what we see often is that when there's an opaque system with not much information, it's much easier to be corrupt. If the system is more open, it's as simple as if you take a restaurant. When you see a closed restaurant, you don't know what goes on in the kitchen, you don't know what you're being served to the table. Whereas a lot of restaurants now have this kind of open kitchen concept. You can see how they're making your food. You can trust that, okay, they're using decent products and there are no, rats running about the place or something like that. Whereas it's the same concept for corruption. The more transparent, the better the processes. So I'm not sure if you've heard about the Open Government Partnership. This is something that Sri Lanka has been a member of since 2015. There were 2 national action plans that were created, and it's a beautiful concept where civil society gets together with the government and works to develop a national action plan while consulting the general public to hear their actual issues. And we've gone through 2 national action plan cycles. Nothing much has come about from that. And if I'm not mistaken, we are now on at a risk of losing our membership with the Open Government Partnership because this has not been adhered to. So with this new system change, with the new government coming in on this anti-corruption platform, we are hopeful that they would like to restart the Open Government Partnership and give that platform for citizens to come together.
Fantastic. My final question to you, Dr. Gunatilake. How must public trust be rebuilt in the system?
Okay. Number one, I think we should end the impunity. Because so far in the country, people talk about corruption, nothing happened to those who were involved with corruption. That is the most important initial step. Then, as I said, corruption, minimizing corruption should be a long-term program. It is not easy. It's a very difficult one. But we can, one thing that this civil society organizations as well as IMF has come out with a very solid set of recommendations. I don't know to what extent the new Anti-Corruption Act has, taken all this into account. If there's any gaps, then we need to have new laws on that. Third thing is, I wrote a paper about corruption. My last word in that paper just before the election, the fate of the country will be determined by the political will to handle corruption by the next government. Right. So, the government should really, put a serious effort to reduce corruption. So, while implementing this IMF civil society organization recommendations, there are a couple of other things we can do, because we also should understand the root causes of corruption. One is political campaign financing. Now, this election was different. Because of the circumstances, the finance was not, people didn't spend a lot of money, especially on a parliamentary election. But earlier, huge sums of money, even for the local government election, I remember Bonragala district, one candidate spent about more than 240 million or something for local government election. So, that is one root cause of the corruption. So, now we are a nation with very high literacy rate. We can conduct all 3 elections at once. We don't need to have 3 days for presidential, parliamentary and provincial elections. Then the campaign financing requirement will go down. Democratically, it is better because now we have president in power. When you have parliamentary elections, then you use government resources and other thing, another form of corruption. So that we can easily implement that one. The second thing is that we need our public sector should be reduced to a manageable level. We need an efficient public sector with less than this, 1.5 million or something, but they should be paid very well, and we should make them efficient, but they should be paid well. Finally, even I disagree with the new government's effort to, not to get the salary and other things. I believe that our system, if we separate implementation and law making and let the bureaucracy to implement the laws and parliament make the laws, 100 parliamentarians is good enough for the country. but they should be paid well. If you look at all the countries with minimum corruption, parliamentarians are paid well. That will also, I think, right now what the government doing is right, because people went to parliament to get these perks and this and that, so to breaking it a little bit for short term is fine. But I think we need to have well paid, highly educated, talented group of parliamentarians who are also well looked after. Then there is no need for them to be corrupt, because they have gained enough money, plus very strong set of law and regulations to make sure that those who are corrupt are punished.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Herath Gunatilake and Nicole Elias, for joining this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Friday. Good night.